Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Jamaica. Good afternoon, members of the media and all listeners. I want to begin by expressing my profound, heartfelt condolences to the families and friends of those who have lost their lives in this tragic hurricane or its aftermath. Our sympathies also extend very profoundly to those thousands, tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of Jamaicans who are suffering at this time from the impact, the calamitous impact that this hurricane has had. And we are aware, of course, that there are levels of destruction. There's a large ground zero, as it's called, which is really the areas of Jamaica that were in the swathe of the hurricane when the eye hit in eastern Westmoreland, stretching into St. Elizabeth, stretching into the more westerly parts of Westmoreland as well, and then moving north into South St. James, parts of Hanover, and of course Trelawney and even St. Anne. The rest of Jamaica has also suffered damage, some of it before the hit of the hurricane. And so we can't leave them out, because there are communities all over the island where people are in a very difficult situation, whether it be due to no access with the roads being blocked or breakaways, landslides and so on. Our hearts go out to all who are in this dire predicament now. Now, I would say that this hurricane and its aftermath represent an existential threat to our society as we know it. People in life-threatening situations of isolation and deprivation mean that unless relief can reach them promptly, and unless the necessary assistance can be found and distributed in an equitable and transparent manner to help them rebuild their lives, Jamaica is going to be facing very difficult times. And I think that point is not lost on anyone who is familiar with what is going on as I speak. In this context, we all need to pull together in unity to get Jamaica through this terrible disaster. This is a time to join hands and hearts, not just in words, but in deeds, so that the whole nation can feel part of responding positively to this devastating situation and the solutions that will help us to pull ourselves out of it. The opposition must not at this time be seeking to score political points as a political competitor of the government. This is not the time for the opposition to adopt that posture. And we are indeed trying our very best to operate in the spirit of that. On the other hand, we must point out where there are areas of need and what we see as the priorities in relation to those needs, where we see weaknesses in the response mechanisms that need strengthening or correcting, and we must provide, where we can, constructive, well-intentioned suggestions to help navigate the country through this disaster. We must also demand transparency and fairness in the distribution of all relief. The relief must get to those who need it, prioritizing those who need it most, whether they be of whatever political color or whatever demographic group they may belong to. They are all Jamaicans, and they are to be treated equally in this time without any form of discrimination or tribal politics coming into it. And we want to stand for that. There can be no place for partisanship or profiteering by political insiders or others connected to them at a time like this. It requires good governance, inclusive governance, authentic communication, and everyone working together. I now move to some of the things that I wish to propose in this regard. I have proposed to the Prime Minister from last week, Wednesday, that he should establish a broad-based task force to be given the responsibility of governance oversight over the relief effort, the relief coming in, how it is dealt with, how it is distributed, not to manage that process on a day-to-day basis, but to provide oversight to those who are managing it. So there's some accountability for how it's done, and that accountability is being held by a broad-based group that can enjoy the support and confidence of the whole society, especially those who are suffering terribly now and no doubt fear that they may not be treated fairly or they may be ignored or overlooked in the response of the state to the crisis. I also think there needs to be a clear command structure for the actual day-to-day management of the response to the relief. And that should be led, in my opinion, by professionals in disaster management, not by politicians who do not know the ins and outs of responding to a disaster of this magnitude. And we should not be shy of seeking international support and help from persons who have career expertise and experience in this regard. Thirdly, we're going to need a Marshall Plan, a well-funded, broad-based plan for the rebuilding and reconstruction of large swathes of Jamaica which have been ravaged by this hurricane. That plan cannot be developed today, but it is vital that we prepare such a plan and that it have the inputs of persons who have the necessary skills and experience and knowledge to design a comprehensive, workable plan that can be executed efficiently and that can have the confidence of our international partners we are going to rely on heavily to provide the financial support for this. And in terms of more specific recommendations now, I have asked the Prime Minister to make an additional allocation of resources to members of Parliament so that they can mobilize communities and contractors to help with the cleaning up of communities that are currently in a state of devastation, clearing roads where necessary, cutting trees and the like. Until that allocation is made, members of Parliament are unable to respond to the needs of the people unless they happen to have some personal resources or access to dealing with it outside of the public system, and many do not have that. I would also say that the process of engaging contractors to do that kind of work should be simplified and made easy for members of Parliament, especially in those areas where there's very limited connectivity and where following the normal bureaucratic processes that are required would be very challenging or impossible for members of Parliament. If contractors have a TRN, whatever the allocation is, they should be invoices, and those invoices can be submitted, but the work should be able to begin. Secondly, we note and agree with the decision to suspend the imposition of import duties and import GCT on disaster relief items coming into Jamaica. However, we believe that the period for which this has been announced is too short, because the time it takes to mobilize funding and make the necessary procurement abroad, the logistics, etc., of getting it shipped to points on land where they can then be shipped or flown to Jamaica takes some time. And to have it cut off by the end of this month is too short. And it's also not clear from the announcement that was made whether goods in transit to Jamaica will get the benefit, even if they haven't landed here at the time of the expiry of the window. I'm suggesting that we recast that window in a way which is more realistic, given the situation that we face. I also think we need an evacuation plan urgently for persons who are without shelter. That needs to be well thought through so that persons can be moved to places of safety where whatever form of accommodation can be erected to support them, whether it be tents or something else that can be put in place, and they can have access to the basic means of survival in an organized way. And that is necessary because right now we have people, many Jamaicans who are exposed to the elements, including babies, including children, including the elderly, including persons with disabilities, and they need to be moved to accommodation which protects them from the ravages of the elements going forward. Those are my thoughts, and I'm now going to hand over to the next MP who is going to address more specific concerns in their particular constituency. I thank you.
Thank you, Party Leader. Greetings all. I'm Isa Buchanan, MP for Portland Eastern, also the spokesperson for Youth and Human Rights. I speak on the behalf of the people on the eastern side of Jamaica. I'm setting the context to say that equity in distribution is going to be an important theme if we are to ensure that all persons in Jamaica are not excluded or left out, but rather inclusion. Now in Portland, this is a direct message from the constituents. Port Antonio is not all of Portland. So in saying that, I want people to understand that there was devastation in Portland Eastern. In particular, the Fellowship Division, which is a valley area, Melissa did serious damage in that area. There are persons who, the roofs are all gone. It's similar in the Mansion Hill Division. So there are persons who are homeless as we speak. I raise this in the context that persons have an ability to try to survive. They try their best to ensure that they move on with their life. It's almost an innate ability these days. But I want the government to understand that when persons are building back their houses and just taking up zincs that probably don't even belong to them to ensure that they have a roof over their heads, they can't wait. It's impossible to wait until somebody comes to say, okay, I see the damage, we will process your claim and then give you some support. That support is in the sum of $50,000, $100,000, $400,000 if it's complete destruction. And if you are a Jamaican and you want to be a homeowner, you know the reality that $400,000 will never be able to put you back in the position that would make you a homeowner or in livable, humane conditions. So when I speak of equity of distribution, although Melissa didn't hit at ground zero in the east, we are an island surrounded by water, especially if you're a coastline parish like Portland, Eastern, St. Thomas, Portland, Eastern and Western, all of Portland and all of St. Thomas. But if we speak of the constituency, I'm not going to sit here or stand here and say that MPs who are not in those ground zeros aren't affected, because we all are. As it is right now, we are a country where resources are scarce. The opposition leader would have reached out to the Prime Minister and there was an allocation. What does that allocation look like? I can only tell you from the lived experience that from a human rights perspective, if you get $1.5 million, that amounts to no more than 600 care packages and probably 22 tarpaulins. Why am I speaking on this? Because it would mean that if you are a member of parliament and you had persons voting for you in the amount of 8,000 plus persons. These are persons that have been affected, and whether you know it or not, it's not just the elderly, it's not just women and children. They're able-bodied persons who live day to day. And I'm just using that as a starting point because I'm saying this, it is not the time to be political. You can't see color, you can't see political parties. You have to understand that on a human rights plane, the needs of everybody will be important. And we might not know it now, but what Friday will look like in terms of how you source your meal, it won't be a laughable situation. We must look at what is happening across Jamaica. And while we start to think of how resources are distributed, I will yield to my senior, Natalie, Comrade Natalie, to speak about distribution and all of that. But what I will say, though, is what is of great importance is that we are to go to the bare minimum and think of the human rights realities. There are persons who are ill, who their medication has to be on the refrigerator. They need energy and they don't have it. So 7 days have passed thereabout, and that medical access is not a reality because I've heard Portland is not a priority. I've heard that, and that is a sad reality because I have the evidence in terms of looking at the photos, the pictures, being on the ground in Manchester, being on the ground in Reach, being in Fellowship. I'm just naming a few: Bellevue, Comfort Castle, Millbank, where there are just total devastation, disaster. Persons who are from the disabilities community, the disabled community, and they don't have a home. The shelters aren't in operation. It's not a continuation of it. Persons have to go far places. So I need people to understand that. And when it comes to the distribution, yes, ODPEM is there. The Ministry of Labor and Social Security and care packages are going out. But I want you to quantify the reality. Is that if you have 300 care packages, that can just go to even one community. And it will, while I stand as a member of Parliament for Portland Eastern, and I can do so much and no more with the resources. And I understand when it comes to the concept of support Jamaica and funneling all resources through the government. That is an impossibility and not realistic. So much so that I have gone on by taking guidance from the diaspora to start a GoFundMe. And it is the diaspora from Portland and persons who are concerned that have raised funds for me to be able to do things that the government is not yet prepared to do. I will just say, think of every single person, because that is my duty as a humanitarian, as a human rights attorney, and even as a spokesperson for human rights and youth. And I will make a compassionate call to all members of Parliament that we are to work collectively through our offices. I will reach out to anybody that's close by, because I get the calls that my family is stuck in Westmoreland and I haven't heard of them. Same for St. Elizabeth, because we're all Jamaicans and we all have relatives across the island. And we are to think on those things. And when we think of equity of distribution, let nobody be excluded. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Salika Jess, Member of Parliament for Northeastern St. Elizabeth. There has been quite a lot of attention being paid to Southern St. Elizabeth. Unfortunately, Northeastern St. Elizabeth has been left devastated by the passage of Hurricane Melissa. It has been almost 1 week since the hurricane, and regrettably, not one government official has actually visited northeastern St. Elizabeth. Now, this is a constituency that has been ravaged. We're talking about entire communities that have lost their roofs, lost their homes. Communities such as Thornton, Windsor, in the Silo area, Bagdale Mountain. There are entire communities where absolutely no home was spared. When you look at the devastation, we're not just talking about it from the home perspective. We're talking about the road network, or roads, especially in the interior of the constituency, have been substantially and completely damaged. We have roads which have burst open, leaving craters almost 20 feet deep. I have communities which have been marooned. There's no way for them to enter or exit. I have residents reaching out to me to say that they can't get out of their community, and they have elderly persons who need to see a doctor, and they can't leave. I went in search of a community yesterday known as Mariba, and I spent over 2 hours driving around and could not find the community of Mariba. I say all of this to say to you that the devastation has been extremely great in northeastern St. Elizabeth. And as a member of parliament, I have reached out to the government for assistance in getting persons who are marooned access so that they can actually leave their communities or enter elsewhere. I have been told by the government that as a member of parliament, I cannot engage with private contractors to have their roads cleared or to have their roads put in a place where they can leave or enter their community. And so I have been faced with a difficult decision where I have to choose whether I obey the rules as they currently stand, in which case it means that residents will be left stranded and trapped and unable to leave, even in cases of emergency. People will not be able to have access to food, water, or I make the other difficult decision, which is to go against the government's dictates and actually engage contractors to put together the roadway as best as possible so that access can be had. I have chosen the latter. And so I hope and I pray that the government will actually make some allocation available to members of parliament in the affected constituencies. I am calling on the government to include the members of parliament, to engage with us, and very importantly, to empower us to help the people who are depending on us because they don't have the numbers for the government ministers, they have the numbers for their members of parliament, and they're reaching out and begging and crying out for help. I'm asking that the government consider making an allocation, particularly to the members of parliament in the deeply affected communities, constituencies, where it's not just a case of clearing the roadways, it's a case of actually engaging professionals who can fill the gaps and the craters and make a way where there is no way, even if it is just on a temporary basis. The hurricane has wreaked substantial damage, and it's important that there is equitable distribution of resources. I have received only 150 care packages from the government for distribution. That doesn't even last one lane in one community because everybody has been affected in most communities. So it's not just the elderly or the disabled, it is everybody who is affected. And so I'm calling on the government to engage and to engage as a matter of urgency so that the relief that is necessary can be had. Thank you.
So I will speak of the experience from St. James, and after which Dr. Dawes will speak about the health crisis and Natalie about coordination. When last I checked, we lost 5 lives in South St. James to Hurricane Melissa. And I speak not only as a person reading or hearing about what's happening in South St. James and in Jamaica, but as someone from South St. James who was on the ground from Wednesday. I left the constituency last night this morning at 2 a.m. to be a part of this press conference because as the chief spokesperson for the people of South St. James, I think it is my duty to get out of the largest constituency in St. James, of the parish. The other 4 constituencies share the other 48%. We're vast. We meet Westmoreland, Hanover, Trelawney, and 2 other constituencies, West Central and East Central St. James. To enter the constituency, traditionally we use 5 different routes. We have only been able to clear 1 route into South St. James, and that is through Long Hill to Anchovy Mafuta, Barnet Bush to take you up to Garland's, Moko, Maroontown, or you go right at Fern, Plum, Cambridge to go as far as you can until you're stopped by downed power lines, poles, landslides, and rivers. Yes, the 7 Rivers has taken the road we have in the Bickerstead Copperwood plantation area. We still have communities that are marooned and do not have access to food. And when I say no access to food, what I mean is that when we advised them to go to a shelter like the shelter at Cambridge High School, we told them that we were advised by the government that food would come after the storm, which was a mistake because some went in from as early as Monday of last week and they have not had food up till now. We were able to send a little boat across, a little blow-up boat across the roadway to get to some, and they got food for 1 night because the boat couldn't hold much more. We have seen the helicopters flying in the sky above us in South St. James, but most times they're going to St. Elizabeth or Westmoreland. They're going to the sexy places where disaster grief is big profit and big public relations opportunities. In South St. James, we're farmers, we're humble people, we don't like to beg. But I'm appealing on our behalf because we need urgently food for our people who are marooned in places like Catadupa, in Jungle, in Awful Gully. We're calling for help for people in Retrieve, where we join Eastern Westmoreland because they were only able to get their dead out of the community just 2 days ago. We're asking to have the health authorities come in because the cows are still floating, the goats are still floating in the waters that have taken and submerged communities like Spring Bottom in the Roehampton area. 2-story high houses are still underwater. We have a coaster bus, you know the height of that, that is still submerged along the roadway to Cambridge. Based on my estimation, over 70% of the housing stock, the business, the livestock, the agriculture has been lost in South St. James. And when I go to the community, I don't know what to say to them because they ask me, MP, you see my house, it was right here, it's no longer here, what do I do? I tell them that I have not yet gotten a word from the government, right? To tell us how we're going to help them to rebuild and to get their lives back together, right? So, we're not asking because we are greedy. We're asking because the collaboration and the coordination on the ground is not reaching our people in South St. James. When I'm able to bring 2 bags of food like I did last night to the school at Malden High, they were not able to make breakfast this morning because it could only last 1 day. I'm asking you to help us to airlift some food into the communities, to get the sick people out of the homes and into the hospital. We have some pregnant mothers. We were able to get to the hospital at Cornwall Regional just yesterday. Her baby was not moving anymore in her belly, right? We have an urgent need in South St. James, and I know everybody is trying. All I'm asking is don't forget South St. James in all of this, because we are proud farmers and we want to get back with our lives, but we need the donations to come to us too. We don't want to stay left behind because we're deep rural. You're going to hear now from Dr. Dawes about the health conditions, because the mosquitoes are killing us already in South St. James, and then MP Natalie Nita.
Good afternoon. Dr. Alfred Dawes, Member of Parliament for South East St. Catherine and Shadow Minister of Health and Wellness. When Hurricane Melissa hit Jamaica, it was a catastrophic natural disaster. If we continue on this path where the government maintains hegemony over the distribution of aid and access to the most vulnerable communities by volunteers, if they try to do it alone, we will have an even more catastrophic man-made disaster. We are seeing a humanitarian crisis unfold before our very eyes. Ground zero was in eastern Westmoreland, a parish that I'm very familiar with, and the devastation that is seen there and in St. Elizabeth and in other parts of Westmoreland, St. James, Hanover, and St. Elizabeth overall. It is mind-boggling. No pictures or videos can do justice for what you see when you're driving miles and miles. The smells of rotting carcasses, the flooded roads. Healthcare has been teetering on the border of collapse because of the situation at Cornwall Regional Hospital and the overcrowding in the feeder hospitals. What we are seeing now is an exacerbation of that situation, where Lucy Hospital, Noel Holmes Hospital, is pretty much non-functional. Up to over the weekend, there was no way of contacting hospitals for referrals. They would just get critical patients as fast as possible loaded into an ambulance and send them off with a hope and a prayer and what limited staff they can afford to send on that journey. The Black River Hospital has been devastated, and Salvamar Hospital, they have major infrastructural challenges, but even more so, the staff, they are also homeless. They are also living out of cars. Many of them are hungry, and many persons cannot provide health care because they do not have the resources. We appreciate that the government has now opened the NHS stores and has started to send out supplies. But we must not be fooled into thinking that a field hospital being set up means that it is an appropriate response to a catastrophe of this nature. A hospital is secondary care. There is no primary care in any of the affected parishes at the moment. This means that the clinics are closed. It means that diabetics, hypertensives, persons with heart disease, kidney disease, those who have a diabetic foot also, they are not being treated. And it means that they are going to have exacerbations and complications of their diseases. And already we are seeing where those who have access to the hospitals have been flooding the hospitals. We will see in the ensuing weeks an increase in mosquito-borne diseases. Within 6 weeks, we can expect outbreaks of dengue and whatever else is lying around, waiting for these appropriate conditions to manifest. The public health inspectors, they need to be empowered immediately so that they can start their food safety checks. They can inspect for water sources that they are potable, they have not been contaminated. Basic materials such as food, temperature, thermometers must be provided. We must increase vector control activities immediately, and this is not just fogging, but source control. Otherwise, we're going to see a massive outbreak of dengue. The gastroenteritis from the consumption of spoiled foods. Already we hear reports of persons eating rotted or rotting carcasses. And the unavailability of potable water will lead to diarrhea, dehydration, and in the most vulnerable, the elderly, the children, and the pregnant mothers, it may mean death. We do not know what the true death toll is from the hurricane, but what we can expect is that if these public health issues are not addressed immediately, we're going to see far more deaths occurring in the aftermath of the storm, in this man-made disaster, than what occurred during the passage of Melissa, the natural disaster we're here to speak about. We must head this off. We must resource the hospitals. We must send relief staff to the hospitals. We must find a way to get health care in the communities that have been cut off up to recently and are still cut off. And the way we may fill that gap is by inviting and coordinating the hordes of volunteers who want to go in and give some health care. Medical missions have played a very important part in the provision of health care in far-flung communities. And it is this provision of primary care, the screening, the early intervention with the medications, the dressing of wounds, that have kept many persons from seeking health care at overcrowded hospitals. If we have dilapidated structures, if we have damaged structures that are understaffed, it is reasonable to ask that volunteers be coordinated to go and man these health centers in the rural communities through the different medical missions. So these things must be coordinated immediately. Organizations that want to donate food and especially water, they must be accommodated. I've had complaints and I've tested the system myself, and I don't want to be overly critical. That is not the tone I want to project here today. But those who want to give are being frustrated by the process, and what is happening is that they are trying to make the journey themselves. The roads are blocked up. On our mission on Saturday, one of the buses broke down and the relief bus took about 4 or 5 hours to make what would normally be a 2-hour trip to relieve the staff that were left on that bus. The roads have been congested, and it is frustrating persons who want to donate, but we must set up a proper distribution network so that those who are impacted the most, irrespective of their antecedents, they get the resources that they need. It means not simply focusing on one particular area, but accepting that this hurricane tore through the entire Western Jamaica, and we must not ignore the plight of those who are in one parish. If the information that came to us through the media came late, and our attentions were already fixed on a particular area that was brought to the forefront of our consciousness. So in conclusion, my appeal is that we find a way to facilitate the donors of foodstuff, sundries, health supplies, and importantly, find a way to channel those who want to give service in the medical field so that we can organize relief missions to go to the communities that Nikisha spoke about, that Zulika spoke about, and others are bringing to the forefront of the nation's consciousness. We have to get medical missions into those communities, and we have to, they are coming with their resources, but there needs to be a greater collaboration between those entities and the government and the state agencies, as well as the opposition, because we have made ourselves available to work alongside the government. So again, we do not want to convert a natural disaster into a man-made disaster because of partisanship, but we should focus more on partnership. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. After a disaster like Hurricane Melissa, the most powerful tool we have is unity. When we are united in purpose, government and opposition, national and local leaders, NGOs, community groups, and private citizens, recovery happens faster. Resources are used better, and help reaches everyone who needs it. Disasters do not discriminate by constituency, status, or color. And so our response must also rise above any division. This is a time for collective responsibility. We all have a role to play. Government agencies, first responders, the private sector, faith-based organizations, non-governmental organizations, and our community leaders all have a part in building back stronger. When we bring our strengths together, we save lives, reduce harm, and make every recovery effort stronger and fairer. But unity must be matched with preparedness. We have to learn from what went wrong. Our shelters must be ready and suitable to receive people before the storm, with basic supplies, pre-positioned, and shelter managers available, trained, and ready to serve. In some instances across Jamaica, the list of shelter managers included persons who were deceased, had migrated, or were simply unwilling to serve. These are gaps we must correct. We must draw on the best practices of experts so that our communities become more resilient to future hazards. That means ensuring all stakeholders have a seat at the table. It means and includes government at both levels, our councillors, our mayors, our justices of the peace, and all who serve as stakeholders at the local level must have a seat at the table, including our opposition, who has not been included in any of these meaningful disaster preparedness or operational meetings. It is important at this time that all the logistics, all the utility companies, the private sector, the insurers, the small businesses, the donors, and international agencies, that there must be a coordinated effort to make our recovery stronger. The media and communication platforms, academic institutions, and technical experts, most importantly, our vulnerable groups and survivors themselves must have a seat at the table. When we work together, the benefits are clear. Lives are saved and harm is reduced through coordinated action. Needs are prioritized and duplication avoided so that no community is left behind. Resources are used efficiently by pooling transport, storage, and funding. Expertise is shared, combining technical skills and local knowledge. Vulnerable groups are protected, including children, the elderly, and persons with disabilities. Public safety and essential services are restored faster, helping communities to recover. And most importantly, trust is built because people can see fairness and transparency. If we are to build true resilience, collaboration cannot happen only in crisis. It must be part of how we operate every day. That means maintaining open communication channels, sharing information, coordinating resources, and planning together before the next disaster strikes. The opposition stands ready to work with the government to strengthen our systems and ensure that every Jamaican, wherever they live, can depend on fair and transparent support in times of need. Let us commit to building partnerships and putting people first. When we work together, Jamaica is stronger, and we lead with compassion, coordination, and accountability. Recovery is not just possible, it is inevitable. Thank you.
So we'll now open the floor for questions. If you have questions, please state the name of your media house. If you're online, you can indicate by using the raised hand icon. If you're in the room, please indicate, we'll get the microphone to you and we'll take your question.
Greetings. This question is for Mr. Buchanan and Ms. Jess. All right, so I heard you speak about the relief supplies not being enough. Do you think that there is an act of sabotage at play there, any at all? In both constituencies or anywhere else, as a matter of fact.
All right, so I'll answer for
sorry, I'm Jason Cross from the Jamaica Observer.
All right, thank you, Jason. I'll speak from Portland Eastern. I don't buy into conspiracy theories. If and I have no facts that there's an act or acts of sabotage. I will say if that were the case, that would be very idiotic. But we're living a real experience, and at this time, even before the hurricane, there were persons that were suffering from food insecurity. That is the Jamaican reality. I'm just simply here to say, listen, tomorrow we are go hungry. Let me put it that way. And next week we are go hungrier. And a hungry man is an angry man. So if somebody is sabotaging, woe be unto you. Thank you.
In the case of northeastern St. Elizabeth, I suspect it is perhaps a situation where the government has their hands entirely full. I think it's quite an overwhelming situation having to deal with an unprecedented act of nature. We've never had a Category 5 hurricane, and so I would hope that no one in their right mind and operating with good heart could deliberately wish to punish residents by withholding food and other basic necessities. So I hope it is an oversight and not that which you have suggested.
Good afternoon, Camille Williams with Television Jamaica and Radio Jamaica 94 FM. I have two questions, and this goes out to, because this is about MPs, anyone I think can take this. So the first question is, how much money would MPs need to adequately respond to the need? And this is each. How much would each MP
I understand what you mean. I hesitate to attempt to answer that with a specific number. The scale of the damage is unprecedented. It's not yet quantified. And it differs from constituency to constituency. So it doesn't permit of one answer per constituency. There is, however, a threshold that I think MPs could handle adequately, and which could make a huge difference because of their connections on the ground. I think it's important for Jamaica to understand that members of parliament on both sides, councillors on both sides, have networks into communities in every nook and cranny of the country. There are very large national organizations that are not centralized in the capital like government is. They're diffused and they're across the island. And the information can flow. Once there's connectivity, the information as to where the needs are flows very quickly and easily, right through up to me, if necessary, as leader, or the Prime Minister, I'm sure. So empowering members of parliament As long as there are accountability measures in place to ensure that the money or the goods are accounted for adequately and properly, using that structure and the councillors is a very effective way of getting to people in need. We will partner with local organizations who we have relationships with on a day-to-day basis, churches in communities and other organizations on the ground to cover the ground where needed. Now, in terms of the amount of money, what has been proposed, we got 1.5 million allocated on the Saturday before the Melissa hit. I had reached out to the Prime Minister that morning about it. We had a meeting at OPM about it. We discussed it, and he said he was authorizing $1.5 million as a kind of pre-Melissa effort to prepare us to have something. And that was useful, and we did our best to prepare ourselves with that. Tarpaulins, water, foodstuffs. But of course, the scale of this is so much greater than any of us anticipated, really, because we haven't experienced it before. That really needs to be replenished. I've been in dialogue with him. I believe he's going to announce another 1.5. I think Cabinet was supposed to, for relief purposes, and they're looking at a $3 million for issues to do with cleaning up and the like. I've said to him that the bureaucracy, the administrative requirements as to how you spend that $3 million, and please, public, bear in mind, we don't get this in cash. These are allocations that allow us to trust, as it were, the services, the food stuff from suppliers, and then we send invoices to a state agency who pay them directly. We don't handle any cash. Now, $3 million, when you're faced with thousands of people who are homeless, is not an answer to that question. And I'm not sure that for the major, well, I should put it this way, for the major response to the housing and shelter needs of the people, and even the food and water needs, the MPs cannot be the sole solution. We don't have the capacity to deal with housing needs on that scale. That needs a national reconstruction program with a proper governance structure attached to it and well-resourced. But certainly, if you were to give MPs even $50 million each, that would be something we would be able to make that money count for the people and the people who need it. I'm just throwing that out as a number, but it's many, many multiples of the figures that are being discussed now. And, you know, one has to bear in mind the resource capacity of the country as well. And the government is in the best position to assess what that is. So, you know, we're getting, hopefully, the CRIF payments which have been committed, and we're expecting that the CAP bonds will also make a payment. The government hasn't yet confirmed that, though the media has been suggesting that it's a done deal. I hope it is, but we're waiting on the confirmation. And there are other funds that were in the budget and so on for national disasters. But bear in mind at the same time that there's been a calamitous hit to the economy. So going forward, we're going to see a contraction of the economy. We're going to see a contraction of government revenues. We're going to see a contraction of foreign exchange flows, potentially. On a net basis, with those flows coming in from insurance and so on, it's difficult to know where we stand. But I'm just saying the government has to assess that situation. But this is an unprecedented disaster. And I would be modification of the measurement of GDP. We were supposed to get to the target of 60% of GDP this year, even though the law says we don't need to get there until March 2028. So we're going to get there 2 years early. So there is some fiscal space in the...
All right, so this is just one case. However, I would figure perhaps this might be a situation elsewhere. My question is, have you been seeing the issue of political partisanship affecting the distribution of relief. And I say this based on the conversation I had with a resident who said that a care package truck came to the community twice.
Is going on. And that's why it's so important that the structure, the command structure to manage the distribution of relief is not an ad hoc thing where, you know, a minister get a phone call and respond here, and then somebody else tug him shirt and him respond there. It needs a structure. It needs clear lines of communication. Right now, I got a report yesterday that 8 people were dead in a community in St. Elizabeth. And they were planning to do a mass burial because they're cut off. I can give you the name of the community. It's in my phone. I have reported it, which is not practical because he can't handle every single report. There is no proper command structure in place. They've put in the same old system that has applied under their leadership in the past. And I'm saying, listen, this is bigger than all that. This is much, much bigger than all that. And we need to have something that the people can have confidence in, a broad-based system with leaders from the private sector, leaders from the churches, leaders from the NGO sector. The opposition should be at the table. Roughly half of the country that are interested in the system of democracy voted for the opposition. And, you know, so to exclude us is not wise because you're going to deprive yourselves of vital information, especially given that some of the most badly hit areas are areas where our representatives have been voted into office. So the structure needs to be put in place that's broad-based. There needs to be proper.
Thank you.
There's a question here online from Portland Spice TV. Are there members of the parliamentary opposition on the committees put together by the government to deal with the aftermath of the hurricane? The leader of the opposition addressed that, I believe. No, I was advised that I need to speak with someone as the elected representative to beg them to appeal on my behalf. So no, we're not at the table. We're not on these committees. We also have online Siobhan Campbell. His hand is raised. Siobhan, please unmute and go ahead with your question. Then we'll take another question from the room. Go ahead, Siobhan.
Can you hear me? Hello, good afternoon.
Go ahead, Siobhan. Go ahead. All right. While we get Siobhan ready, we'll take another question from the room.
Good afternoon, everybody. Zara Burton with 18 Degrees North. Asking about your CDF funds. 20 million, I believe, is the allocation each MP. Have those been used up in your constituencies? Can they be deployed ASAP? I'm just wondering, just generally, I have another question after that, but just generally speaking, can you get that accelerated in any way, or are there certain rules holding you back?
Okay, so for members of parliament who have returned, you might or might not still have CDF funds remaining. And if you do, it may or may not be accessible based on what it was programmed to do. So there are specific procedures to follow to be able to get funds to do mitigation works. And if you did not have a mitigation fund set aside, then you wouldn't have access to any of it. In the case of new members of parliament, the outgoing member of parliament might have utilized all of those funds already, and the new member of parliament won't have access to a new allocation until March of next year, after the new budget period has ended. You also would have to wait until, if you do have the funds and you need to, I believe that the opposition leader did include in his presentation a call for the reduction in the bureaucracy across the board.
But not for CDF.
I would just add to that, just for public information, how the CDF works is a $20 million annual allocation per constituency. 1.5 of that is for admin support. So it's really 18.5 that's available to be spent. There are certain heads of activities that you must allocate that 18.5 across. Welfare, social housing, economic enablement, sports, education, etc. And then you have to design programs which have to go to a parliamentary committee and get approved for each of those. So the whole 8.5 million has to be approved by Parliament before you can get access to it. Now, there has been no decision to modify those rules. What has happened, that 1.5 million that was allocated on Saturday was an addition to the CDF. So it is being spent through the CDF processes, and the same agencies that normally would apply will receive the invoices from the suppliers of the food, water, tarpaulins, etc., and make those payments. They did not require parliamentary approval for that. I guess Cabinet approved it. So I don't think there's much, if anything, available in the 20 million allocation that can be really used. Some people may have some funding for housing, and for example, I have asked whether for what I have in my constituency, which is available for housing, if we can use it for the responding to the needs of people. Right now, a lot of people in Jamaica have leaking roofs, a lot of roof damage. There's a huge demand for zinc and other roofing materials. So I've written to the CDF to ask if we can use that, if my constituency can use those funds for that. And they have indicated that we can. So, you know, they need to broaden that, and that all 63 MPs have that, a facility available. In relation to the $3 million that the PM said would be approved today by Cabinet, or he was expecting it would, I have said, as I said in my opening presentation, rather than go through the normal bureaucracy for that, where you have to get NWA to approve the specific works, they have to send somebody to look at it, and then you have to write them and nominate who the contractor is, because it's below the threshold where it has to go to tender if it's only $3 million, and they can't do anything until that. I'm saying for many of the MPs in these areas, there's no connectivity. So to require them to go through all those just to clear some roads and chop up some trees is really, you know, it's excessive. So what I would suggest is that we just allow a situation where contractors who have a TRN can issue an invoice, the work can be done, and that invoice is then sent for reimbursement in due course.
I also had one more question. This was for Dr. Dawes. Health, mosquito-borne diseases. I know you mentioned it in your presentation that there is a possibility that we will be getting sicknesses come through like dengue. I wanted to know if, as of right now, whether you have heard of any cases of these mosquito-borne illnesses as of yet, and also, I know you mentioned, I think, fogging. I think you may have used a different term, but vector control. What other measures, given the fact that you said that they're coming, what other measures would be necessary to mitigate against that at this point? Because as I think somebody else mentioned, there are some carcasses in different streams, water bodies.
Everywhere. Yeah. There's water ponding all over those parishes, and there's dead animals all over the place, rotten.
So the question is that posing a health risk as well? And so if you could just address some of the things that, in addition to what you said about vector control, what else from a medical perspective would be necessary to mitigate against those diseases, and also dealing with these dead carcasses and even dead human bodies too that are not claimed?
So what we are faced with now is a public health crisis in the making. we speak about the ponding of water, these water reservoirs that are caused by the receding floods. We do have a very fertile breeding spot for mosquitoes. So we are going to see a massive increase in the mosquito population. And we know that Aedes aegypti, which transmits dengue as well as chickpea and Zika, that is native to all of the parishes that have been affected. With the Haitian migrations that we are seeing coming in, we are at risk for malaria. We must consider that the rotting carcasses of animals can contaminate underground water supplies. If we have a contamination of underground water supplies, we're going to have a significant increase in the number of cases of gastroenteritis. We saw after the Haitian earthquake, there was a rise in cholera that was brought in by relief workers. We don't know if relief workers are coming in with other diseases as well. And we have an incubator now of persons who are living outdoors. They're prone to respiratory conditions and they are prone to gastroenteritis as well as mosquito-borne diseases. So we have to address the breeding sites. That's going to be very difficult to do because of the large areas that have significant water pooling. Fogging can take place, but it is only a temporary measure. We have to get, as much as possible, mosquito repellents, mosquito nets out there for persons who are exposed to the elements. And we have to be testing water sources very regularly. We have to get the chlorine tablets, the water treatment solutions, as well as tablets, and water. We need to get water. And with all of this, persons in the affected areas, they have to be advised of what to look out for, how to practice proper hygiene, how to, unfortunately, we have to say, isolate bodies so that they don't come in contact with decomposing bodies and they are exposed to infections. So unless we fix primary care immediately, we're going to see this disaster that is man-made if we don't do it right. And I choose that term carefully because if we can prevent a lot of this, if we get the teams out there, if we have a structured response, we get the public education out there, if we evacuate people out of those areas where they're at risk, and we get the potable water and proper food, the hygiene tools that are necessary to avoid these outbreaks, we can do it. There is hope, but we just have to do this the right way.
I just wanted to add one postscript to my answer to your question about the CDF. The CDF, as normally allocated, is not disaster relief funding. It is to help in the constituencies to make life a little easier for people who need help. With the scale of what we're facing, the existing allocation of 20 million cannot be even considered as a response. There needs to be special funding using the resources that have been made available from Jamaica's disaster relief financing structure and any additional resources that we are able to garner from the goodwill that Jamaica enjoys, which is significant across the world, to empower those entities, those people who are in a position to reach those who need help. And it can't be the CDF that's the answer to that.
And speaking as an incoming MP, we didn't even start out with $20 million. So it's whatever has been left behind by the MPs who preceded us that we have to make do with for the rest of the year. Let's hear now from Siobhan Campbell from Nationwide. Please unmute and go ahead, Siobhan.
If I'm not seeing Siobhan on mute, can I take the stage?
Yes, please go ahead. Say your name and the media house you represent.
My name is Colin Bell, Portland Spice TV. I have about 3 questions. I heard MP Jess said that she went in search of a community yesterday. Could you expound a little bit more on that for us, because you say you did not find that community? I also want to ask, does the People's National Party as a party can source assistance for the people who needs help? And of course, Comrade Natalie, do you think this is a stage where the Minister of Local Government needs to use that equalization fund to provide more funding for councillors? Thank you.
Jess first. So we'll go to Jess.
So when I mentioned that I could not find the community, I'm referring to the community of Mariba. And we started out by checking the access points to the communities. So we went to one location where that is the road that should lead to Mariba, and there was no road. There were just crumbling asphalt. There was just debris of asphalt. We went to another location that should have been the other way to enter the community, and it was just totally impassable. Everything, the road was broken away, split totally. We were told that we may be able to find the community by going through a dirt road in the hills. And so we went into the hills trying to find the dirt road, took several dirt roads and could not find the community until further, about 2.5 hours later, we found a house, and they told us that if we continued to walk, because we couldn't drive, so if we continued to walk, we would find another house further down, and they would have to call out the community to come to us, because the community, they are trapped inside of the community. They are trapped in the community. So that is the reality on the ground. People are marooned, and they can't get in and they can't get out. Thankfully, I've made arrangements for some heavy-duty equipment to be brought into the area today to try and get them access. So hopefully I'll have better news later tonight.
Yes, so I believe that the local government system has an SGR, which is a facility that is provided to assist with emergencies. After dialogue with the local government minister, they were allowed, councillors and mayors are allowed to utilize some of what is available, if any, in their SGRs, which is their emergency funds. But I believe it's not enough. I believe the equalization fund can be utilized, so I'm answering you, yes, it can be utilized to empower our local government representatives, as they are the first port of call. Everybody goes to the councillor first. Most times because they are living in the same communities with them. And so they should also be empowered, whether through the equalization fund or a special disbursement through the national budget at this time, to be able to assist with what is happening on our parochial roads. So while we are engaged in clearing our main roads so that major vehicular traffic can go through, our community roads need to be cleared urgently, because they can't get into major communities to be able to purchase food and to be able to have access to medication. And so there has to be a great emphasis at this time to empower our local government representatives to be able to respond quickly.
I think the second question was to do with the People's National Party and fundraising and so on for disaster relief. So in the last week or so, we have developed a capacity as a party to respond to the needs that we're seeing on the ground, and that our elected representatives at the local government, the councillors, and the national level, the MPs, are communicating to us. So we have the capacity to receive financial contributions locally and from overseas. And we have relationships that we've developed with established charities that would import and make the relief supplies available for distribution. And we're putting in a structure for this with an accountability element, because we want to account for every dollar received and every item received and distributed. And the treasurer of the party is helping to design this. She has been managing this process for the past week, and we're bringing on additional human resources to give support so we can have a robust mechanism for anyone who wants to assist through our portal. Now, I gather that there's some thought among the government that they want to stop anything coming in other than through ODPEM and the state system. I would caution against that. I think that people have their preferences, donors have their preferences. Let us not deny any Jamaican in need the opportunity to receive a benefit which a donor would be inclined to provide for them through a particular channel, by saying everything has to go through the state channel. I think there should be coordination. I think we should collaborate and share information, as long as that is on an open basis and there's genuine sharing of information. But I don't think we should just restrict this whole relief to one channel, because that is going to result in people not benefiting as much or at all from what is available. And so I encourage the government to rethink that, if that is indeed the way they've been thinking.
Okay, let's try once more for Siobhan. Siobhan, please unmute and we'll take your question.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Hearing you well.
Good afternoon. Siobhan Campbell, Nationwide News. I have just two quick questions to the opposition leader. You said that the matter at hand is not one of politics. And while we understand the suggestions you've put forward, is it wise then to have a press conference of this nature, which essentially raises the matter to a political discussion? And second, there is a criticism that is going around suggesting that the opposition is attempting to govern from the opposition benches. How do you address that?
Well, the opposition cannot govern the country. We don't have any authority or status in governing the country. The civil service respond to cabinet. We are not part of that system. And all state agencies ultimately respond to ministers who are in cabinet. So that point is really nonsense. But the first issue about whether this is political, we are sharing information with the public. We have information which is important. We have ideas which we feel are important. And we feel that, that there's nothing, as long as we're approaching this in a spirit of national unity and to help Jamaica come out of a desperate situation, we ought to and should share our ideas with the public. And that's what we're doing. We haven't today attempted to criticize the government. We have made suggestions. We've pointed out where there are weaknesses, but we're not seeking to criticize the government at all at this point in time, because this is not the time for that. This is a time for us as an opposition to work with the government if they will let us. And if they won't let us, we will still work in the interest of the nation as a whole, Labourite and PNP, because we are all Jamaicans and we want Jamaica to recover from this. If we don't pull together, our corner dark. So let us pull together as one people and use the best resources available to us, the best thinking available to us, the best organizational skills available to us, with a common heart for the interests of the people who are suffering right now.
And there's no better note to end this press conference. If you go home tonight and you can lay your head on a dry pillow, if when you look up you don't see stars, you are blessed. We in the West, we need your help. Pray for us. Pray for Jamaica, land we love. Have a good evening.